And so today I offer you 5 facts about the book of Hebrews in less than 5 minutes to get us started. For a long time, everybody attributed basically everything that was written in the New Testament to Paul. It was a way of giving it some sort of theological gravitas, I guess. But it's pretty much virtually guaranteed that it's not Paul for lots of reasons. One, the writer is clearly a native speaker. It's very complicated, very intense Greek, very vocabulary rich and grammatically dense. And so it's probably written by somebody who spoke Greek or was trained in Greek and was very highly educated. Paul was not any of those things. Plus, Paul liked to talk about himself, and there's no references to Paul in this book at all. And so it's pretty likely it's not Paul. So who could it be? There are 2 popular guesses. The first is a guy named Apollos, who you can find in Acts. He was from Alexandria, and he was noted to be highly educated, well-informed, devout Christian preacher who was trained in Greek rhetoric and style, which makes it pretty likely that he would be a good candidate. And the second candidate is a preacher couple named Priscilla and Aquila, who we also hear about in Acts as the ones from Italy. And later on in the end of the book of Hebrews, we hear them say that they hoped they could return with Timothy at some point, and they are writing as the ones from Italy. So it's sort of a connection of a nickname. And so it's probably one of those 2. So we sort of know the New Testament as the Gospels, and then the history book of Acts in the middle, and then the letters. And then the last one is Revelation, which is an apocalypse. But Hebrews is not a letter. There's no greeting. There's no, hello, how you doing? I'm greeting you from afar. This is my name. This is who I am. This is why I'm writing you. All of the things that you would find in a letter. And so it's probably a sermon. It is written in the rabbinical style of the first century temple. It used the common format and style of a rabbinical teaching, and it's very similar to what's called a midrash that rabbis would use to explain difficult theological concepts through either extending them and making them like a deeper and wider, or by using metaphors or guessings or what ifs to help explain a theological concept. It was most likely written to folks who were well trained and knew the Old Testament, written in Greek. The Old Testament written in Greek is called the Septuagint, and that's what is quoted in this sermon. So that's most likely the people who it was written to. So like a lot of the New Testament books, we date when it was written by when it was likely not written. So it was quoted extensively in a letter by a guy named Clement of Rome, which we know was written in 95 CE. So it had to have been written by 95 and had been in circulation, well enough read that other people would have recognized it by 95 CE. It was likely written after Claudius, the Emperor Claudius, expels Christians from Rome in 49 CE because the letter references a recent difficulty that the church experienced. But it was most likely written before the destruction of the temple in 70 because the author probably would have referenced it, and the author continues to refer to sacrifices and temple practices in the present tense as if they're still happening. And so that narrows it down to somewhere between 50 and 70. And we can narrow it down probably a little bit further to before 64 CE, which is when Nero violently expels the Christians and begins the first violent series of persecutions of Christians. And the author refers to the church in Rome not yet having to have spilled their blood for Jesus. It was not easy to be a first century convert to Christianity. You were pulled out of your community, whatever you'd grown up in. The author of this sermon is concerned that the people who made the choice were starting to grow weary and tired, and they were facing the temptation to just go back to life as it had been before. And so the author here is arguing that when we grow tired and weary, when we are tempted to walk away from our faith, that is the exact moment when we need to replant ourselves in deeper theological soil.